All right, e4. Well, we're playing aggressively with black. And what does that entail? Let's play a Sicilian. I don't know what's Sicilian, but we're going to play a Sicilian for sure. It's a computer move. It's cheating for sure. e4 is a surefire sign. And d4, come on. This guy is cheating. Let's take it. And it looks like a Smith-Morra is on the cards. Let's check. Yes, Smith-Morra. So, what do I recommend against the Smith-Morra for people who don't want to get checkmated? There's a couple of ways to decline it. I don't recommend accepting it. Squills, no, this is perfect. No, don't worry about it. I can't chat because I have this account, but this is perfect. Now, you guys are giving very interesting ideas, but the best move that I've run into that doesn't involve taking the pawn is actually knight f6. All right, there comes the actually again, knight f6. You're developing your knight, you're counterattacking the e4 pawn. And white essentially has to transpose into an Alapin Sicilian by playing e5. Why don't I recommend taking the pawn? It's not that it's bad, it's just that Smith-Morra players generally like it when you go into those main lines, and it really is very, very dangerous to take the pawn, legitimately. Black has to know a lot to not get crushed, assuming that white knows his stuff. So bishop d3, Squills decides not to go e5, and this changes the situation a little bit, because in the Smith-Morra, the bishop comes out to c4. When the bishop is on d3, it's quite passive. It stares at the pawn, and so now we take the pawn. We have a better version of the Smith-Morra. Still dangerous. We still need to be careful, but the bishop being on d3 really puts a damper on the amount of activity that white can have in return for the pawn. Now, what should we do? How do we proceed? Well, in the same way that we normally do. Some of you want to play e5 here. Understandable, but as I'll explain after the game, it weakens the d5 square. Everybody should kind of see that. So white can play bishop g5, trade that knight off, and perhaps position his knight on this outpost. So instead, let's begin with a flexible developing move, knight c6. Let's begin with a flexible developing move, knight c6. Then we'll play d6. And as we often do when we've got these two pawns in the Sicilian, we address the question of this bishop, typically by fianchettoing it, although we'll see. Let's go d6 to prevent him from going e5. To prevent him from going e5. And generally in the Smith-Morra, the bishop is on c4 at this point, which really changes the landscape completely, because white has moves like e5, there's the d-file that's open. Here we can breathe easily. H3 is good, stopping the bishop from coming out to g4. And we have a couple of options here. We can play it conservatively. We can play e6 and bishop e7. Or we can play it... I was going to say we can play it conservatively, we can play it liberally, and then the people playing e6 and g6 will hate each other for the rest of their existence. Now, in this particular instance, e6 is good when there is an urgency to our development. Here, there is no urgency to our development, so we might as well go g6, bishop g7, because e5 is not possible. We can afford to optimize the position of our bishop. All right. And that is how Daniel Naroditsky started a civil war in the chat. Okay. All right, bishop g7. Now we want a castle. What about the libertarian move? The libertarian move would be, Daniel, don't tell me where I should develop my bishop. I'm leaving it on f8. All right. Oh god, my battery is low, so let me charge my headphones so I can hear him. Okay. Bishop G5. All right, well, this doesn't threaten the knight. We don't have to move the knight. We have a couple of options here, and there is a 5-head move here. The 5-head move is also a move that perhaps some of you want to play habitually. You can castle, but what move can you play after Bishop G5? What's often the question? Do you play this move or do you not? Right, H6. There's always a debate. Do you play H6? Under what circumstances? And follow the logic this way. If you castle, white has the very typical plan of going Queen D2, followed by Bishop H6, in order to trade the dark-squared bishop. We don't want to trade the dark-squared bishop. That leaves our king side with weaknesses. This is our strongest piece. So by first playing H6 while our rook is still here, we get the bishop off this diagonal. Then if we want to castle, we don't have to worry about this idea. But maybe we won't want to castle. Maybe we'll want to keep our king in the center and actually go after his castled king. Goes Bishop E3. Okay. Let's castle. Let's play it conventionally. You might look at this and say, well, doesn't this make Queen D2 even stronger? And if he plays it, which I think he will, to the rescue comes a very natural, very important move. Without this move, the entire idea of going H6 doesn't work. We bring our king to H7, supporting the pawn. If we play G5, that's just a little bit too weakening. The king is quite safe on H7. The pawn protects against this check. You have to be careful about this pin in the future. But right now, there's nothing that he can do about it. There's a pawn chain. G6 is protected. We're fine. Remember this defensive method as a way of preserving your bishop. It's not ideal. It often leads to annoying tactical opportunities like bishop knight G5 check, as I said, but it's still quite solid most of the time. Now, we don't want to go E5 because that would blunt our bishop and it would still weaken this D5 square. Instead, let's address the question of our bishop and let's come out to E6, a square that you usually want to stay away from, right? But that's when your bishop's on F8. When your bishop's being ket out, this is a great way of positioning your bishops. You don't need the E-pawn right now, so it's okay to sit on it for a bit. And the bishop is nicely centralized. It controls the D5 square. You've got good development. We're up a pawn. Slight edge for black here, but Squill's playing super solid and pretty good chess. And in these kinds of solid positions, it's important not to do anything too crazy. We want to act in a measured way to improve our position. We have several ways of doing that. We have many good moves here. But let's start with a pretty impartial, a move that we can all agree is a solid one. Let's go rook to C8. Let's activate our rook, contest the C file. Why not? No, not reinventing the wheel here. Probably not the best move, but a very solid one for sure. It's hard to make progress, and hopefully this is what I'm trying to illustrate. When you're not sure how to make progress, a lot of people freak out. But in many situations, you have this pool of pretty reasonable improving moves that you can tap into, which is where my vastly overused expression, not every one of your moves has to be climbing Mount Everest, comes from. You can make moves like rook c8 safe in the knowledge that they're probably not going to hurt you. When are we pushing d5? Some of you are noticing that we have a pawn break that we can make use of, which will probably open up the center. I don't know who benefits from that, to be fair, because d5 also opens up his bishop, as you guys can see, and maybe leads to more acute tactical opportunities. So I don't think it's a bad idea to consider d5 even in this position, but I don't see the necessity of rushing with that. I like the center being a little bit more closed. Rook e1, good move, activating the rook. Okay. Knight d7 by J. Bell, very interesting move actually, I quite like it. Knight d7 would lift the knight around either to e5 or to c5, and it would open up the diagonal for the bishop. That's a lovely move. Another good move is to consider, to continue looking around the board and saying, well, what little improving moves can we make? What small but substantive actions can we undertake to make our position healthier? And to do that, it's good to make some observations. Some of you notice, the b3 square. Maybe we can get our knight there. But if we play knight a5, that puts the knight on the rim. He can slide his knight to d4. We shouldn't do that just yet. Which is why J. Bell's move, knight d7, is so good, because it covers the d4 square, and it recruits this knight, and we'll play this move, it recruits this knight potentially to be the one to aim for b3. So there's no negative to this. I like the move knight d7. Queen a5 would have also been good. Once again, there's two key lessons in this stage of the game. The first being moves like rook c8 you should embrace. The second being, what was I saying? I already forgot what the second was. It was related to the move knight d7. Plans, improving moves, climbing Mount Everest. Yeah, this thought completely escaped me. No, it's not that it's the fork. There were two aspects to playing this position. The first being, small improvements, but I'll remember what the second one was later. Tells you how important it is. Knight to e2. Now, he's trying to bring the knight over to f4. That's also a good move. Very, very good play. So this is where, again, we have a series. Oh, I remember the point. We need to be careful. We need to adapt to the situation. What should we do? Knight c5 is possible, but potentially leads to the loss of a pawn. So where else can we go with the knight? What should we do? How should we adapt to this? Yeah, knight e5. Let's go knight e5. That's the secondary idea behind knight d7. But aren't we blocking the bishop again? Didn't I just say that one of the advantages of knight d7 was to unblock the bishop? Now I'm blocking it again. Not that simple, right? Because this knight on e5 is not going to remain there for very long. It's either going to take the bishop, that's a pretty important bishop, or it's going to move on to c4. So I'm betting on the fact that we're probably not going to remain on e5 for very much longer. Okay, let's go knight takes c5. Indeed, if he moves his bishop away, knight c4 will be very, very strong. Some of you I know are anxiously looking at this a7 pawn. This was by design. We're not actually losing a pawn for several reasons, and even if we were, this would not be the worst pawn to lose. I'm kind of doing this deliberately. And white is in a tough spot, right? Because he either has to give away this bishop, which means no more shenanigans against a king, or he must allow the knight to come to c4. What should Squills do? Squills should give up the bishop. He should go bishop to d4 here. That's a very high level move. Thinking ahead and saying, well, when this trade is undertaken, I want this bishop to lose its effectiveness. Now, what should we take with? That's also a good move. Rook takes the rook. What should we take with? Not an obvious question, folks. Let's think. Just because I said that, you think bishop. I like taking with both pieces, actually. But let's make the positionally conscious move, take with the bishop. If we take with the queen, we allow rook c1 with tempo. He controls the c file. So, not that that's bad. We can then just go queen d7. But I just want to show you that particular logic. In addition, the bishop on e6 might have been susceptible to a move like knight d4, hitting the bishop. Perhaps we could even reroute it to b7 in order to hit the e4 pawn. We lost some control of c4, but we still have enough control of it to play knight c4. And this was an inaccuracy. Bishop c2, well, I'd even call it a mistake. White's position here is worse. He doesn't have sufficient compensation. But bishop d4, the position is very much tenable. And we'll discuss this after the game. Squill's playing at a very high level overall. Bishop h3, right? Okay. Queen d3. Another interesting moment. What should we take here? Well, from a material perspective, we should take the pawn. From the perspective of eliminating white's best pieces, we can seriously consider taking the bishop. I'm kind of torn, to be totally frank. But let's take the pawn. I'm feeling quite greedy today. I need some dessert to my fun. Yeah, this would have been Pog with this uncontested bishop that could have then taken b2. But I'm banking on the fact that his queen has no good squares. His queen has no good squares. If it comes to d2, we'll go back to c4, we'll have our cake and eat it too, then we'll take the bishop, and we'll be up 2 pawns. If his queen goes to b3, well, then we can consider bishop e6. So, okay, he does go queen b3. We could consider bishop e6. The problem is that this pawn is going to hang. I did see that, but to be completely fair, I myself underestimated it a little bit. That's okay. Because I see something clever. Let's go here anyway. Yes. Remember what some people forget. It's kind of oxymoron. But what some people forget is that when there's a queen on b7, we frame this in terms of trapping, right? Can I trap the queen? And oftentimes the answer is no, we don't have the resources. But a queen like this can also be used as a tool to trade queens. If a queen trade is good for you, thank you, the hero list, then a vulnerable queen can not only be attacked by other pieces, but it can be quote-unquote attacked by a queen to force a desirable queen trade, which you might want if you're up a pawn, for example, or you want control of a file. What about control of the c file, ladies and gentlemen? We hit the bishop, we hit the queen, we force the trade, we'll be up a pawn, and we'll have massive domination over the queen side because of our, all of our pieces are nicely poised for the endgame. I hope that concept makes sense. I think it's an important one. Note that the bishop defends the knight. And he can't take this pawn either before or after the queen trade because the bishop on c2 will be hanging. I just hung my queen. That's right. This guy. Queen b6, yeah, queen b6 was not possible. Queen a5 was possible, and let me write this down. But there was a reason I didn't like it, and I'll show that after the game. I'm excited to talk to Squills. Put somebody on the spot. Reveal my true colors. Okay. Alright, it's battery. Good move. Squill's playing very well. And now we need to take stock again. We need to realize that our pawn on a7 is hanging. And because it's the endgame, the significance of hanging pawns is not trivial. We need to defend this, or we need to do something about it. So knight d3 is a good thought, but remember that the rook is protected. Bishop c4 is a great move, attacking the knight. But let's play clinically. Let's play a5. Why not a6? Because in the future, we might want to drive this pawn to a4 to fix the weakness of the pawn on a3. All right. And, we have some cool tactics here, but they don't quite work. Yeah, they don't quite work. So, do we want to give away the bishop? We certainly do not. Let's keep it. I'll talk about that, Corin. Good eyes, but that doesn't work. Okay, now it's time for us to turn the dial up on the pressure. His position is clearly flimsy, but what can we actually do? Oh, we have a 5-head tactic. Now, earlier, what you guys might have noticed is that there was the possibility of playing bishop takes d4, bishop d4, and knight d3, attacking the rook. But then, if you're following, white had the move rook to d1, attacking the knight. How has this move changed this entire dynamic? Well, if you think about it, well, the king is on f1 now, so what's going to be different at the end of all of this? The king's going to be here, the rook's going to be here, so we're going to have a pin with rook b5. Okay, now we need to play fast here because I'm a little down on the clock. He does correctly give up the exchange. Squills is really good. He's put up a phenomenal fight, but the fight comes to an end here. We're up an exchange and a pawn. So we're just going to finish this one off. Bishop c4, asking for the bishop trade. If he doesn't, yeah, he does it. Okay, now what's the winning method here? Well, one of them is just to vacuum up as many pawns as possible. We're going to take this one. And now we're going to push. No need to give it away. Then we're going to walk our rook back to a2 and take this one and promote it. Simple. We don't even have to give up any pawns. We could, but if you can defend pawns so easily. Okay, rook b3, a3. And now very clinical moves to play f6, protecting this pawn. He gives up his bishop. Okay, he doesn't. We could even make a knight here. Let's move our rook back. Notice that I'm not rushing to promote it. A trick for time scrambles, folks. People promote at the first opportunity possible. You don't have to do that. Sometimes you can move the rook and facilitate the checkmate. Check and checkmate. Great game, Squills, and now it's time for the debrief. Squills, can you add me on Discord? Let me know. First of all, phenomenal game. And now the moment everyone's been waiting for. I'm excited about this. We're going to do a call with Squills where we go over the game. I'll invite him to an analysis board. So just one moment. All right. Squills, let me know if you can find me on Discord and add me.
Hey, Daniel, can you hear me?
Yep. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you as well. I wanted to say first that I'm like super stoked that like I got to play a game with you, and big fan of the stream. Been watching for a couple years now, so yeah, really appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, and thanks for agreeing to come on. As payment, just your social security number, credit card information would be enough, and I think we'd all be satisfied.
Yeah, are you looking for my mother's maiden name as well?
That, not gonna pressure you on that, but just that it would be nice, just kind of say if you don't want to get banned from my stream. That is.
No, I totally understand. Like it's, I think it's completely reasonable. So.
All right. Well, thanks again for making time. Let me invite you to an analysis board.
Sure.
Hopefully it works. Oh.
So I learned. I thought I was up at DGen hours because it's 3 o'clock where I'm at. But if it's 5 where you're at, I don't know what that makes you.
And there has to be a new term invented that post DGen.
Yep.
Great. So Smithmore, I think, was a great choice. I haven't faced it too many times, so I was kind of happy. Have you encountered Knight F6 too many times? Are you and you don't have to reveal any opening info because I know everybody's waiting to prepare for you. Are you a Smithmore a regular, or were you just experimenting?
Let me tell you this. So I actually, as far as like the Smithmore goes, I don't really know any theory at all. The only time I've encountered this was one game against. I played the Count, and he played the same thing, and that's the only time I've seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of just was. Yeah, so my main goal was just to kind of maybe play something solid and just try to not blunder any pieces, and that's kind of where I went with it.
Right. No, that makes sense. And Knight F6 is not very cooperative because, yeah, most Smithmore players like to see DC.
Yes.
And, my goal is to be maximally annoying. But what this forces white to do, I mean, if you're... The main theoretical move is e5 here. Mm-hmm. And this transposes into the Alpen Sicilian. Black has to move the knight, and this position usually arises via the move c3, which I've played with white before on the speedrun. And then one of black's main moves is here, and you get the same position by transposition.
Gotcha.
But the good thing about playing this with black is that the positions that occur are quite a bit less tactical and explosive than in the Smith-Morra, although they're still full of life. So I would totally recommend for you to look into this line with white. And then white can go knight f3. So that's a theoretical line, but it's definitely still fun.
Sweet. Yeah. Yeah, I've messed around with the Alpen like quite a while ago, like a few months ago. I never really learned any theory about it, but it definitely seems like a good alternative if I don't want to do something quite as crazy.
Right, and if you learn it, then in this position, e5 is just natural because you're already going to know it. So the one drawback of this, of course, compared to the Smith-Morra, is that the bishop is generally on c4 on the Smith-Morra.
Right. Yeah, I was going to mention that actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's interesting how I think in Gambits particularly, the placement of one piece can make all the difference because that difference in placement can prevent very important tactics from being possible. So the way that the game went, I think you played, as close as it comes to ideal development. H3 was good to stop bishop g4. I could afford to make this move g6. But in the Smith-Morra, what's really interesting is that if we just make the regular Smith-Morra moves, so it takes, if I play the same way that I did here, already at this point, but particularly in this position, can you spot a pretty strong tactical idea for white, and maybe you're familiar with it?
A strong tactical idea for white. So I'm not too familiar. I do know that there are some tricks with like some bishop takes f7.
That's exactly right.
Is that actually it here?
Not immediately, but if you open the d file, the queen might land in trouble given that the king is you know, it's in an affair with the f7 pawn.
So then let's go with e5.
E5 is absolutely right. And the thing is, if I play knight takes e5, you take, and now as you can see, the king is, yeah. Exactly, bishop f7, and you can make moves if you want in these lines with white.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do know this trick here. Like, I see sometimes when they don't develop the knight out early enough to protect the queen, that sometimes this idea is possible for me to do that, but
right.
I wish people did it. I wish people would let me do it more.
Yeah, it's one of those things that that makes these gambits appealing, is how many of these there are. But of course, black can play d takes e5 and avoid this. But the fact is, and I'm not a specialist, so maybe I'm missing the market, but even in the endgame, it's the king is weak, black is underdeveloped, and after knight takes d8, you can strike with knight to b5. You can see how unpleasant this becomes, right? Knight is coming here. The fact that it's an endgame doesn't mean that white doesn't have attacking chances. I think black's in trouble here. And, you know, king d8, then you can go knight g5. This is always a funny line, and you're like...
The mirror, yeah.
800 forks. So, anyways, long story short, all of this is possible because the bishop's on c4 and the d file is open. So compared to this position, I'm able to take these luxuries. And so that's why I think black is doing pretty well here. Okay. Now, this stage you played great. Bishop g5 is perfect. I played h6 so that after castles, what were you planning to do here?
Yeah, I was just gonna do this and then try to trade off the bishop, of course.
Which is exactly right. Which is, and the chat can now see, like, this is exactly what I tried to stop with h6. Bishop b3 was good because you're not allowing g5 with tempo. And queen d2 was good, at least getting the king onto a slightly more vulnerable spot. And now I love that you played rook ac1, which is patient. You're bringing the rook into the game. And the move that I thought maybe was not entirely necessary was a3. Was your idea to was your idea to prepare b4, or were you worried about the pawn becoming weak?
So there's like a couple reasons behind it. One was that I wanted to make sure that my knight might have some mobility, as well as I just know that it's like really common to bring this like knight here and go after the bishop. And so I just wanted to kind of make sure that you weren't able to do that. Because again, like, I was trying to play solid and just like try to not trade off as many pieces as I could, because I know that maybe once you trade off like a lot of pieces, it might be a little easier for you.
Right. Well, didn't you get the memo that I suck? The less pieces there are on the board, the more I suck.
I don't think that's the truth.
That should have been your motto. But I think this is a very reasonable intention. Thanks, Keitharian, for the prime. Now, first of all, specifically, let's say that knight b4 wasn't a concern. What sort of general improving move could you make if you weren't worried about something like knight b4? What seems reasonable as a follow-up to rook ac1?
Rook ac1. Maybe I could get my other rook involved.
Perfect.
Or yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I would get it to d1 so it stacks up with the queen. And if you think about the long run, right? So let's say rook fd1. Let's say I play the same way. I played rook c8 and you move your queen away. You're already creating this standoff, and combined with the fact that the bishop has an x-ray against the king, our good old friend e5 might come knocking on black's door again.
Right.
So this creates some issues for black. But the thing is, knight b4 is actually not particularly scary in these positions because you can go bishop to b1. And this is a super important resource in a lot of situations where there's a knight like this. This bishop is super safe. That's what makes bishops great. They can be on b1 and do the same thing they do from d3. And then you're just going to go a3 and push the knight away. Or you're going to use this knight to your favor. It's undefended. It's x-rayed by the queen. And guess what? It's no longer protecting the e5 square. So e5 already is sort of a semi-threat, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So one of the lessons here for your games is if you identify a move that at first makes you feel uneasy, if you think a little bit, if you can determine that that move isn't actually scary, you can provoke your opponent into playing it, because a lot of people in the 1400-1500 range will be tempted to play this move. And if that turns out to be a waste of time, people will often not consider the drawbacks of a move like knight b4, i.e. the fact that it relinquishes central control, because it seems to be doing so much, if that makes sense. So
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of players like at my level, they really don't like they don't think that far ahead, and I think it'd be good for like me to be kind of thinking about some ways to like set some traps like that, you know, to maybe like lure the knight out here so that I could use it like for like a trick later to because it's an undefended piece.
right, or worse comes to worse, push it away. Yeah, people are biased in favor of these quote unquote active moves that that cross the hemisphere. So you can use them as a powerful way of not only setting traps, but yeah, making your opponent go in the wrong direction and take the focus away from the center, for example. So in any case, not a huge deal, but it also gives me this square potentially for my knight, which I kind of like. And that was the idea of knight d7, where I wanted to bring the knight here and then potentially to b3. So I really liked your move, knight e2. Taking maybe you didn't play it with that specific intention, but it does discourage me from going knight c5 because you're defending that with the rook now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't see that. My main goal was just to like kind of like protect these two squares, and then I also even thought about like bringing it here and maybe going for a kingside attack.
Perhaps even to f5. Yeah, this idea of knight f4 is quite nasty. So I like that move a lot, and so that's why I sort of decided to change my approach. And I really thought that the critical moment, the moment when things took a turn for the worse, came rook takes c8 is fine because if queen takes c8 you can go rook c1 with tempo.
Yeah.
This I think was plan. Yeah, and I think this was the pivotal moment actually because you're in an unpleasant dilemma. You can either give me the c4 square or you have to give away the bishop that potentially creates chances against the king. Mm-hmm. And I assume that did you spot knight c4 and consider queen b4 or queen d3 to be the sort of lesser evil than giving away the bishop?
No, I guess my main thing here is I didn't really like think about what you wanted to do. I just thought about like, I don't want to trade off my bishop, and I just wanted to maybe bring it to a different diagonal. I
am the most important person here, so not thinking about what I want is it just represents how toxic this community is. So this is definitely a situation which leads to a lot of mistakes where there's all these variables that you have to account for. But assuming that you have to give up the bishop, the way you want to think about this position is, okay, let's imagine that knight d3, queen d3 is on the board. What stuff do I want to do in this position so that the transition isn't as painful? Can I take the sting out of any of the things that will ensue following the trade? And that leads you to a good move in this position.
So I see that after you do that, you would be threatening to take this pawn. So maybe I could like just push b4 or something.
You're on the right track, but you could nip this whole thing in the bud. It's not just the pawn that's being threatened. This bishop is having a great time.
Oh, then maybe bishop
Bingo.
d4? Yeah.
Bingo. Bishop d4 is I think the classy move. Because knight d3, you take the knight, and you're only down a pawn. I have no good move other than to take your bishop. If I go e5, well, I've weakened all of this stuff in the pawn. I'm not going to do that. But if I take, what would you take with here?
Something. Let me see.
Either the queen or the knight. Let me give you a huge hint.
Sure.
What does your instinct say?
My instinct says the knight so that my rook would be like activated a little bit.
I agree. I think knight takes is good centralizing, and yeah, e5 is an idea later on. So you're very much in the game here. And that's the key takeaway, I think. If you've accepted something as a reality, like I have to give up this piece, you make this preparatory move to deal with the consequences that will be true after the trade or after that stuff happens.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I like that.
Because here, yeah, I take another pawn, then I gave it back to get all my pieces in and force an endgame. And this endgame is unfortunately very, very unpleasant for you because I've just got all my pieces on ideal squares essentially, and your bishop is sort of dangling.
Yep.
And you did what you could. I thought rook c1 was the best move you could have played. And in order to prolong the game, you're definitely close to being lost here. I think that you have to probably move the bishop back and try to get a rook trade, which is not good for you in the grand scheme of things. But this pin is, a potential problem, which is kind of what happened in the game.
Yeah.
So I think this would have offered some chances. After knight d4, bishop d7, yeah, this was, unfortunately for you, yeah, this arrangement would have allowed bishop e5, which you spotted, and you made the most resilient move, but you've got a little too much material at this point.
Oh yeah, yep, totally spotted that.
Right, you calculated that in just a couple of moments. So yeah, this queen c8 was a bit of a lucky resource, because at first I was going to play queen a5 to attack the rook. Now, if I had done that, where do you think you should place your rook?
Well, my initial instinct is just to attack the knight.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. Rook b1, and then if I drop the knight to c4, you could perhaps take this pawn or this pawn, and you're still in the game.
Okay.
So yeah, once I did this, the situation kind of takes a turn. So really, I think there were two key takeaways. Bishop d3, I would say at your level is not a bad move to get a Smith-Morra-like position, but the fact that the bishop is on c4 gives me this chance to develop pretty normally. And then I think you played great moves. a3 was a bit of an inaccuracy, so asking yourself, is the quote-unquote unpleasant move actually a threat, or can I use it to my advantage? And then how can I prepare for something unpleasant that's probably going to happen? You identify the bishop, and you kind of preemptively put your bishop to contest it. And I think you're still in pretty decent shape here. So that was a really hard-fought game. You could see how much time I used. I mean, basically all of it.
Yeah, I was like pleasantly surprised that I was able to bring it down to like kind of at least like an end game or close to it. So that was good.
No, I can tell your fundamentals are very solid. Moves like rook ac1 tell me that you know what you're doing in any given middle game position. So that was great. Any questions that you had or thought process that you wanted to talk through? I feel like I've been running off of the mouth. So
no, you're good. It's been a lot of good learning things. So maybe the only thing that I think that I would just be a little bit, so like I was debating a long time around like move 14, kind of where is move 14? Back here a little bit.
One move ago, yeah.
Yeah, I like right here. I was really unsure, like, because I know in like the Smith-Morra, since I'm like down a pawn, I'm trying to go for like an initiative and stuff, and like I was even considering doing some stuff like that, but I was like worried about sacks and like not having it not lead to anywhere. So like, what should like a game plan be if like I don't feel like I have some sort of initiative per se?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say two things. You're right to think g4 is taking it a little too far, although thinking about such a move is great. And this is a move you'd play if you were really desperate. If you were like down a piece here, I would consider g4. But given that you're down a pawn, you can afford a more measured approach. And this is where I think this move would give more of an opportunity, because what makes this move confusing is, well, you're not playing on the king side. How does this help? But you actually kind of are indirectly with the plan that I'd outlined previously, where you can now move your queen away from d2, and do you see what white is threatening now? Let's say I go b5.
I'm actually not sure I do.
So if you think about what queen e2 accomplishes, it opens up an x-ray against black's queen. If the d6 pawn were be made to disappear, you would have a discovery. Yeah, bingo.
Okay.
And so you actually are using the position of black's king to your advantage, just in an indirect way.
Gotcha.
So takes.
And yeah.
Exactly. Boom. So that would be one idea. But if you wanted to play more directly on the king side, a plan that you can consider in such scenarios, again, trying to capitalize on this diagonal is saying, well, if I had this pawn on f5, maybe that would help break down some of the defenses in black's position. So even a move like knight h2, it's not my favorite move. It's slow, but in the absence of other ideas, this idea of pushing the f pawn could be a good compromise. And this is where what I said in the previous game, when you've got your kingside pawns, pushing the f pawn is going to be the least weakening of the three between the h,
Right.
the g, and the f pawns. They're not all the same. So if you want a plan that involves weakening your king a little bit, particularly if you have a bishop here, moving the f pawn might be a pretty safe bet.
Okay. Yeah, this is actually a move. This was one of my candidate moves. I would say like top 2 or 3 that I was like looking at in this position. But I was just like because I was like wanting to do this,
Right.
and go over here, but I was just a little bit worried about opening up my king against a GM. You know.
Well, yeah, I would have just sacked everything on g4. And in this specific position, something like d5 is very good for black. But I'm sort of outlining the general approach to take.
Sure.
And no, I thought you played solid. You played really good, and really it was a couple of very small things that accumulated. So that was a great game. I hope you found this at least a little bit instructive and fun.
Yeah, definitely more than a little bit. I really appreciate it. It was a good game.
Thank you. Good on you to say that, because if you had said anything else, that would have been your last day in the stream. Just kidding. Well,
I gotta watch myself.
Of course. Well, I won't keep you any longer. I know it's probably late, and thank you so much for agreeing to come on. This was a lot of fun for me, and I'll definitely give you a chance at a rematch at some point in the near future.
I'd appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it.
Of course. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Okay, thanks. You as well.
Alright.
We'll see you.
Yep. See ya. It's so funny because now schools will be in the chat, and I feel like there's this meta transformation of mediums of communication. But in all seriousness, huge thank you, schools. Yeah, I can tell you're super chill, and not only did you play really, really good, but I appreciate you hopping on. And I know there were a lot of people willing to come on, so that was great. I think that went pretty well. That went really well, and the game itself was super rich as well.